All right, my name is Bobby Smiley. As Christian said, I am the Digital Scholarship and American History Librarian here, and today I'm going to give a little talk on a project that I've been working on for the past year and a half called the Religious Soundmap of the Global Midwest. I'll give a sort of overview of the project and give you a sense of the kind of things that we've done, the background into why we did it, and some possibilities going forward. Okay, excellent. So I just wanted to acknowledge first that this is a project that is grant funded, and the PIs are from different institutions. One is Amy DeRogatis, who is in the Religious Studies Department here at Michigan State, and the other co-PI is Isaac Weiner, who is a professor at Ohio State, but it's a collaborative effort, and I'll mention a little bit more about that. Plus we have some outside consultants as well. So just to give you a sense of what I'll be talking about, first I'll mention the grant that serves as the basis for the project, then I'll mention aspects of the project itself, and then I'll go into some possibilities that the project provides us. Okay, so first, grant. The project itself, so this Religious Sound Map of the Global Midwest project, was made possible by a Mellon-funded initiative called Humanities Without Walls. This was a grant given, I guess, through the University of Illinois, but for CIC schools to foster collaboration around the idea of the global Midwest. The Midwest, of course, usually being seen as a kind of provincial spot stuck between two cosmopolitan coasts. This grant was designed to encourage digital scholarship to controvert that notion, or at least to qualify it and measure it. So one of the things that was integral to it was that it was collaboration. So these were not simply proposals for grants that were based in one university, but indeed the encouragement was to partner with as many university partners as possible. Wherefore, our partnership with Ohio State. I'm kind of hoping this will be the case Saturday too, but I had to pick the perfect picture, of course, where some OSU guy is taking a faceplant while we're running in for a touchdown. So cross your fingers. But it's been a very amicable collaboration, that notwithstanding. Just to mention very briefly, part of the granting process, and this is sort of an aside, but I do want to acknowledge Villeheart Davidson's importance in this, was to get us to think about how we put together these types of grants and thinking in terms of need, opportunity, approach, and the stewardship of the funds that you receive. Again, these are all sort of important considerations that we took in when we were beginning to outline what we were doing. And so what were we doing? So here I'm going to provide a little bit of information about the project itself. So the project had 4 primary objectives. Sorry, I'll be reading off the slides. To produce sound recordings representing the diversity of Midwestern religion. To use these sound recordings to create the Religious Sound Map website. That all unedited recordings and interviews will be archived by OSU libraries and made available for unspecified future use, offering a valuable public resource for scholars and multimedia artists. And then finally, to construct museum installations and traveling exhibits to promote our project to a broader audience. So there's a public humanities element in that. This was especially fortunate because both the PIs have been engaged in projects that intersect in both space and the auditory and the sonic. So Amy DeRogatis' book on moral geography talks about the American frontier and mapping. And Isaac Weiner's new book, Religion Out Loud, looks at the place of religious sound in public spaces. Specifically, he spends time on, if you're familiar with the controversy of the past 10 years over the call to prayer in Hamtramck, he actually goes through that case very thoroughly. So to begin with, why sound? We were sort of inspired by the work of a Canadian anthropologist named F. Murray Schafer, who in the 1970s began doing work on looking at what he called sound marks. So for him, you have things like landmarks that are, of course, obviously connected to a physical site, but there are site-specific sounds too. And these sounds sort of travel. They indicate movement, they indicate fluidity, they also indicate place too. So we thought it would be interesting to track or to catalog or find as many of those sounds, record, capture, I guess the word, as many of those sound marks in the area that were connected to the religious. So why religion? Well, helps that the two people who are in charge, the PI's a religious studies scholar and I have a background in religious studies. No. Well, I think one of the reasons why we felt that religion was especially well suited for this project is because in addition to the sort of transient nature of sound marks, the fact that they travel over space and intersect in time, so too does religion. So this is taking from the work of Thomas Tweed, who's an influence on the research that's been done, that we've been doing, who teaches at Notre Dame. He sees religion as making home and crossing boundaries, so you have the sense of place, but you have the sense of migration as well. And of course about finding place and moving across space. Excellent, thank you. So why religious sound? I mean, first instance, we could think of something like church bells, sure, or you could be really oblique and think about the crack of the bat and the roar of a crowd, sort of a civic religion idea. Well, so for us, we wanted a really capacious definition, something as broad and elastic as possible. So we posited the following: any auditory event related to beliefs, practices, and places that are spiritually significant to individuals, communities, and scholars. So again, that captures not only what we understand to be traditional sort of religious sound, church bells, but also ones that may be less obvious, things like civic religion activities, so a football game or a baseball game. I just want to mention why mapping. One of the things that we felt that mapping offered us was certain affordances that other platforms could not, to depict, especially in a zoomed-in sense, how these sound marks played out and how they can be connected. Because a big part of the project, the ultimate part of the project, we'll talk very briefly about at the end, is to connect sounds across space. Moreover, there's been an interest in the Midwest, specifically the religious history of the Midwest as chronicled in Religion and American History, which is a leading blog in the area. This is the abstract. I'm not going to, in the interest of time, I'm not going to read through it, but I encourage you to look at it in the slides that will be posted. So part of the initiative was to make it a multimodal project. So it has three components: a research component, a pedagogy component, and a public humanities component. So for the research component, we wanted to leverage Michigan State's work in sound and leading pioneering work in sound. So the sort of stuff that's been done at the Vincent Voice Library here at the MSU Libraries is probably the leading sound library for the human voice, and something we've been very interested in exploring further. Also a pedagogy component. This is showing field work. So what Professor De Rogatis has done, and so is Isaac, is they have integrated the field recording of the religious sounds into classes themselves. In fact, she's doing that this semester. I just spoke with one of her classes today. So part of this project is to have the students work in cooperation and collaboration with the PIs on the project. And then finally, this is sort of work that Isaac's done with the Atlanta sound mapping project. Finally, a public humanities element, and this is sort of consonant with, in this case, NEH, but the idea that these digital projects are not simply inward-looking or siloed. They're designed to be intelligible and accessible to the public at large. Here's this proof of concept site that's very, very sort of primitive, but we're working on it. Again, check it out through the slides. And finally, I want to close with possibilities. So the first thing, I did allude to this very briefly. Ultimately, in the map that we want to create is we want to have these sound marks, but we want people to be able to pick out the sound marks themselves, string them together, and be able to remix them. And in so doing, provide their own definition of what they understand the religious to be, right? So part of that idea that we have this very elastic, capacious idea of what religion is reflected in the ability of people to go to the site, pick a series of sounds that they think constitute perhaps a religious journey or the idea of the religious, string them together, and then eventually remix them and download them. How to do this? Well, it's a lot of complication, but no, you're fine. No worries. One of the things that we've been looking at, and indeed I think we'll be using, is Neatline, which is a mapping program, basically a mapping plugin for Omeka, which is an exhibition software. We've also been looking at Leaflet.js. Here I point to the ATL Maps project. This is Atlanta Maps project, which was begun by Isaac and another scholar. But here they're using raster maps. So these are sort of ideas that we might be piggybacking off of. And with that, I close, and I guess there's no questions. I'll take them at the end. Thank you very much indeed.